What is going on, everybody? So I'm going to do another topic video today. And today I wanted to talk about something I thought would be fun. Recently I did a video talking about critically acclaimed films that I do not like. Well, today I want to talk about some films that were not enjoyed by critics or sometimes people alike that I actually really enjoyed. And I wanted to kind of turn that on its head and just talk about some films that I feel like didn't get enough love, that I genuinely enjoy, or think that maybe they were just misunderstood for the time that they came out. And I just thought that this would be fun, and I would love to hear in the comments what some of your favorite films that aren't necessarily looked at super positively are. I really always enjoy, because sometimes you find some real hidden gems with movies that people really don't like. So without further ado, let's get into it now. First up on this list, which there's a couple people I've met that feel the same way about this movie as me, and it is Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness. This is a movie that I know got a splat rating on Rotten Tomatoes, was really negatively talked about by a lot of people, and I still, to this day, do not understand it. Very similar subject matter wise, tonally and cinematographically, to Shutter Island, but I personally think this movie is way better than Shutter Island. I think the performances are all really great. This is early in Mia Goth's career and she's fantastic. I love how moody and atmospheric this is. It has a pretty decently long runtime, I think like 2 hours and 26 minutes, but I think the pacing is really well done. The way information is revealed to you is really unique to this type of a movie. I think even Dane DeHaan's lead performance is really excellent, and every time I think about this, I want to revisit it more and more, and I really genuinely don't understand what people don't like about this, other than I know the ending reveal is a little cheesy, but it didn't really take me out of it. I still thought that it was really well done and that the pacing really made the payoff great, even though it is a little cheesy. And I don't know, I really like this movie a lot. I don't see a whole lot of problems with it that are super glaring. I could understand this kind of tone and this style of film maybe not necessarily being for everyone, but I definitely enjoyed it and I look forward to revisiting it all the time. Up next is one of my favorite films in recent memory, the Jim Hosking film, The Greasy Strangler. Elijah Wood actually produced this film, and this movie is hysterical. Very much Tim and Eric-esque, dark, abstract comedy that's like really disturbing, over the top, in your face. Very reminiscent of John Waters in a way, where it's like pushing the envelope as to what an audience would expect a director to do in a situation to kind of shock you. And this movie consistently does that, but in a way that I think is genuinely funny. And there's a lot of really smart moments in this as well. I love just kind of how stupid some of the comedy is, and then how smart some of the comedic punches are. It's a really interesting dichotomy. And one of the things that I loved so much about Tim and Eric, and I still love about them, is that they could do like really overt dumb comedy while also doing really intelligent, nuanced comedy. And it takes a very specific type of director to balance those very polar opposite tones. And I think The Greasy Strangler does that really well. This is a movie that is super quotable. It's absolutely hilarious. I love all the performances in this. All the actors are like, where did you find these people type of hilarious, which is what I love about this brand of comedy specifically. And I'm not sure why more people didn't enjoy this, other than they're not into weird, surreal, strange, in-your-face comedy, but I am, and this is a movie that I recommend to a lot of people, and I hope I've disturbed some people recommending them this one. Up next is going to be a more recent film that this is probably going to be one of my first really controversial opinions, and that is David Gordon Green's Halloween Ends. I did a full review on this movie. I loved this. It is my favorite one in the David Gordon Green trilogy. I thought Halloween 2018 was a bland rehash of the original. I thought that it lacked any of the intellect and the nuance that the original film had. There were some cool violent sequences with Michael Myers, but I felt like trying to pose this as like Laurie Strode's redemption arc and only really keeping her in the film for about 25 minutes while making these like podcasters the central focus was really stupid. Halloween Kills was like one of the worst films in the entire Halloween franchise. People were like, oh, the kills are cool, but it was just really poorly written, bloated, and awful. Halloween Ends, tonally, in my opinion, matches the original the closest to Halloween 2, where it is all about the resurgence of evil. And obviously, we're telling the story through a different character's lens, which is fine because I was so burnt out on Michael Myers at this point. He is the least interesting of all of the horror villains because there's really no personality to him. He was a kid who snapped and murdered his sister, and then all these years later, he's come back to hunt down this girl that I don't even think he was really targeting her at first until they've done the Laurie Strode was his sister plot arc, which technically I think David Gordon Green said was erased because this was after the events of Halloween, not Halloween 2. So that whole thing doesn't really matter. So there's not any connection between these characters other than he tried to kill her and he didn't. So like, I didn't really want a Halloween Michael Myers versus Laurie Strode movie. I thought this whole idea of how evil manifests itself through another person, and the whole concept of the entirety of Halloween is that evil takes many shapes and forms, and putting it to where this young kid, because of these tragedies and things that have happened in his life, has kind of turned into this awful person. And it was a really unique plot arc that was handled really well. I thought it felt very 1980s and in a way that was so brilliantly done. I loved the cinematography. I thought the violent sequences were great. It's a movie that I just grow to appreciate the more I think about it, and I am convinced the only reason people didn't like this movie is because they wanted Michael Myers versus Laurie Strode the entire film, and that would have just bored the hell out of me. And I'm glad David Gordon Green took a risk and did something different, and I will always stand by this movie. Up next, one of my favorite films of all time, The Life Aquatic, with Steve Zissou from Wes Anderson, a film that was not well received by critics when it was released. I believe still to this day, this is the lowest rated Wes Anderson film on Rotten Tomatoes, with a splat rating of I think 56%, which I don't take Rotten Tomatoes to heart, but like at the same time, for Wes Anderson, that is very low reviewed. I think this movie is perfection. I have no issues with it at all. I think the production design, the cinematography, the performances are all absolutely amazing. I think the father-son dynamic that's built up between Bill Murray and Owen Wilson in this is so perfectly executed. The humor is some of Wes's best. I think about lines in this movie non-stop, perfectly paced. It's just an amazing experience, and I'm not sure why this is like critically so poorly reviewed, but it's a movie that I love more and more. It never fails to bring me to tears. It is one of the movies that made me fall in love with cinema and made me want to watch movies and want to engage in film more, and it's a movie I will constantly think about over and over again until the end of time. Up next, and I've talked about this a few times on my TikTok, is the 2012 remake of the film Maniac from Frank Calhoun. This movie I don't believe got very good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, or the Letterboxd average isn't very great. I am a person who really, when it comes down to it, am not a huge fan of remakes unless the director takes a new vision or tries something different. What I like about Calhoun's remake of Maniac is this taking it through a POV lens, shooting it completely differently, casting someone like Elijah Wood, who is very different than the original casting for Maniac. He's much smaller, he's a little less daunting than the original killer in the original Maniac, and I think Elijah Wood does a really great job with this material and kind of transforms what this source material can be. I think diving into the psychology of the killer a little bit more is a really interesting route to take, and it could have just been a copy and paste remake, and it's far from that, and it's just as suspenseful and just as well done. I love the score. It's equally as ambient. It's really uncomfortable, and both movies in my mind live in a very separate space that I appreciate and love both of them so much, and I always look forward to revisiting the 2012 film. It is fantastic. Up next is going to be the film The Lodge that was released in 2019. This movie doesn't have like horrible reviews, but it's very middle of the road, and I really loved this movie a lot. I'm a huge Riley Keough fan. I think she gives a phenomenal performance in this, and what I really love is slow burn, really heavy tension films that give you anxiety, and that is what this movie is. It builds tension so well to where the payoff in the third act twist of this movie is so well earned, in my opinion, and goes in a direction that I never would have expected. This is from the same directors that made the film Goodnight Mommy, which I was not as big of a fan of. I didn't think that it was all that great. The twist in that wasn't anything special to me. I feel like this was a huge growth on that type of build up tension and anxiety. And this movie, just like, there's so many shots and sequences that live in my brain that I can remember very vividly in a way that is so impressive for this type of film with such a simplistic premise. Just being isolated in the middle of nowhere during a snowstorm and feeling like something is off, and like having all of this like background information about what's going on in the lead character's life. And I liked this one a lot, and I really think that people misunderstood this one and they expected something very different, and I'm not sure what they expected, but I got everything out of this one that I wanted, and I actually want to revisit this one again very soon after talking about it. Up next, and this might be one of the funniest ones on my list, is the 2001 film Freddy Got Fingered from Tom Green. This movie holds a special place in my heart. It is one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. It is absolutely hilarious in just like a stupid, like boner comedy kind of way. But what I really love about this movie, and I know a lot of people have analyzed it over the years, is that Tom Green, in this time period, obviously had his TV show on MTV. He was blowing up really big, and MTV was like, here, we're going to give you money to make a movie. And I feel like this is Tom Green looking at the production company and saying, hey, you're all a bunch of idiots. You just gave me millions of dollars to do whatever I want, and I'm going to make the stupidest movie imaginable. And that's exactly what he did. But not all of it's just dumb comedy. A lot of it is similar to what I talk about in the Greasy Strangler, that it's really intelligent comedy masked as dumb comedy. And I think that there's a really delicate balance that has to be struck in order to execute that well. And Tom Green really does it with this movie. I find this thing to be absolutely hilarious. There's some of the jokes in it that are incredibly dated and probably really offensive to a lot of people, and I can 100% understand that. But every time I revisit this one, I'm just like, oh God, I love it so much. I know it's not like the greatest thing in the world, but it's really enjoyable to me, and I will stand behind this movie till the end of time. Up next, I had to talk about a horror franchise movie. I'm not going to go into every single one, but this one I feel like gets super misunderstood, and that is Don Mancini's Seed of Chucky. This movie is one of the most hated films in the entire franchise, and what is hilarious to me is if this movie would have been released this year, it would have been one of the most praised films in all of horror franchise history. This movie tackles inclusivity concepts, especially with the fact that they have a gender non-conforming child in the film, and it's done so in a way that's not joked on or not treated unseriously. It is much more of a familial drama between these three characters than a horror movie. But one of the things I respect so much about Don is that he has constantly subverted audience expectations throughout his entire career with the Child's Play franchise to keep it fresh and alive. And although there are dated references in this movie that obviously if it was rewritten today, they could put things in that are more poignant. But aside from that, it's really funny, and Jennifer Tilly is phenomenal in it. I think that it is just such an enjoyable experience, so much different than what you would expect from this type of movie, and it's one of my favorites in the entire franchise. I'm not sure why people hate it so much other than they just wanted another generic slasher film, but I always pat a director on the back when they're willing to completely subvert audience expectations and do something new and fresh that actually works. So I had to finish with this one because it is one of my favorite films of all time, and I will never forgive audiences for not going out there and supporting this film, and that is the Luca Guadagnino Suspiria remake, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest films of all time. I'm not 100% sure why this didn't do well, because it is better than the original in my opinion in every way. The original has great style, great cinematography. I really enjoy the experience, but this film takes all of that but focuses heavier on the narrative structure. The characters are so much better fleshed out. There's great mystery in it. Tilda Swinton gives like the performance of her career playing multiple characters. Dakota Johnson is incredible in this. The Tom York score is absolutely absolutely amazing. It is everything I want in a horror film and much, much more. And I'm not sure why people didn't like this when it was released. I think it is brilliant. So what are some films that you think are underappreciated? Let me know in the comments. These are just some of them. I could have made a list that was twice as long. And if you want me to do another list, let me know in the comments. I love making these types of videos. One of my favorite things to do. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot. Lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.